We're very excited to have our very own Karen Cleveland from Leadership Fairfax today talking about leadership. And if there's one thing that we've learned is a lot from last year. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what Karen has seen in the marketplace as well as her own experiences.
So I will just take it from here for those of you that I don't know, which I believe are a couple of you. My name is Karen Cleveland. I'm the CEO of Leadership Fairfax and have a long history with the Chamber. I was the first CEO of the Chamber and then had the opportunity to serve as the chairman of the board not too many years ago, working alongside Charles on the board and the executive committee and Angela at the time. So it's great to be back here. I live in Reston. I not only built my career here in Reston, but I would say Reston built me as a community leader. And I'm still so proud that the Reston Chamber is held true to how it was founded. We used to refer to it as a chamber with a heart because it was built not just to support the business community, but to support the business community as part of the overall community. David, I'm glad you shared earlier what you did during your talk about addressing resistance and stuff, because I'm not going to really talk about that, but it's surely an important part of this, everything we're going to talk about today. So what I've been asked to talk about is, what is this looking like next? What did we learn? How do we apply that? So if there is this new reality, what is it going to look like? And how should we, as leaders and as managers, adapt to that? And what are the most important things? And then how do we measure that success? I'd like this to be interactive. So quite frankly, you can take yourself off mute if you want right now and just, jump in if you have a question or want to add a comment. It's a small enough group. It's easy for us to do that. So I want to start just so I make sure I know a little bit more about you. So I'm going to launch a few polls here that all go together. So there's actually 3 of them. So what is your role in your organization? What are your terms of coming out of the pandemic? And stages of re-entry for your organization. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that'd be helpful. Great. So you're all in positions of managing people at various levels here. So that's really important to know, and it fits nicely with what we're going to talk about here. That happy and cautious is exactly what we're seeing in our world at Leadership Fairfax as well. We have some folks who definitely are not ready to be in public at all, but they're looking forward to getting there at some point. And this seems to be evenly split here. Interesting that one of you is doing permanent remote work for all.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. Well, thank you for that information. That's really
Have you seen a difference, Karen? And I mean, I know that I know to pull down, but was this something that you have been inquiring about on a regular basis and have seen a difference? Like, I feel like the last week, the world has changed, with regards to the announcement, CDC, and now with Northam's.
Well, there's just as many people saying, believe it or not, saying what I heard from the governor and the CDC scares me more. And I will be more cautious. Because it seemed like it was such a shift so quickly that for those that are cautious, they're doubling down. So I think we need to. So if you're happy and cautious, this feels really good. However, so I grew up on a football field. So I always think of things in terms of sports and football. And as we started to get closer to spring and vaccines were out there, the goalposts were clear, at least to me and for a lot of us. And then they just kept moving further and further away. So when you think you're almost to the end zone, but it keeps being out of reach, what we started seeing toward the end of this pandemic is actually increased anxiety. People were getting pretty comfortable with how they were working. And even though it was kind of suspended animation for most businesses, it was a new normal. And we were holding out hope for a more promising future on the horizon. And it wasn't coming fast enough. So what's happening is right now, people are more anxious for the most part. And here's the important part of recognizing that as a manager. We are in a transition. Transitions are important to understand from the standpoint that any transition in life, whether it is natural transition, like becoming an adult, going through puberty, becoming really old, those things are thrust upon us. But there is a time between where we are and where we're going. And then there are elective transitions, which are things like going to college, getting married, taking on a new job, all of those things that we choose. But there still is that in-between space between where we are and where we're going. Some people who love change, people who have no fear, people who are good visionaries, don't care if it's clear on the other side of that transition. They just leap and they're able to make it through that transition quickly. Others get caught out of fear, uncertainty, all of those things about the future, and they can get stuck in that transition. I always think of that kind of like quicksand. If you stay in there too long, you're just churning and churning, and you can get sucked into it, and it makes life worse. So as a leader and a manager, it is your job, our job, to recognize when people are getting stuck there and to help them get to the other side, be that bridge for them. It's really important to help. So thinking about where we are right now in that transition, a friend of mine gave me this language, and I think it's important to think about, is that re-entry from this is going to be turbulent at best. Turbulent at best to re-enter. And remembering that everybody is going to be at a different place. Keep in mind and think back to where you were at the beginning of this and where you are today. And as a leader, we have a tendency to always be thinking ahead and thinking of others and thinking of our people. And oftentimes not taking that time to think about, well, where are we right now? So I think it's important to pause for a second and just really think about and let yourself feel where you are on this reentry and in this transition. The other thing that we work on a lot at Leadership Fairfax, because it's all about deep dives into ourself and into leadership, is that reconciliation between how you're processing something intellectually and how you're processing it emotionally and in your body. So it's that three things, the whole part of us, our intellect, our emotions, and our physical manifestation. So just recognizing where you are and where others are in this reentry, I think is critical to be able to learn from where we were and help your people bridge this gap into that transition. Because there's a lot of people still like this. They're scared and they're screaming, and I'm not so sure that they're ready for all of this. Now, this is a slide I used at the last BES, so I actually haven't changed it, but I would like you to let me know or just think about how many of these things were true for you when you were going through COVID. So did you have a high school senior in the household? How are they doing? Or even a high schooler, what was that like for them to be homeschooled and transition? If you were homeschooling, if you had a parent or loved one in a nursing home, I know Angela went through that. I just went through it with my mother. It's very challenging. Or you have a parent or a loved one who's isolated in another community or another city. If you or your spouse are on the front line, if you were a teacher or a first responder or a healthcare worker, for women that were pregnant, very challenging time. If you had a trip planned during this time and you had to cancel over and over again. If you had a child who was a college student and had to make a difficult choice, whether to defer or not, or if you were laid off, you're all managers, probably didn't have to deal with that, but you may have had to lay off other people. Or you may have a spouse or a child who was laid off during this time. Sometimes there were silver linings during this, even for furloughed and laid off folks, where you were afraid that your company wouldn't survive. Or maybe you had planned to retire and you had to change that. So just think about that when you think about reentry, because those are all things that can still be traumatizing to us in the rearview mirror. And certainly for our people, we want to understand if any of those things happened for them, just because we flip a switch and people are vaccinated doesn't mean that they are able to let go of all of that trauma, particularly people who were impacted financially or with health issues during this time. It doesn't just go away. So I preach this a lot, and I just want to set these next two slides as a framework for some of the things I'll talk about, is that in order to lead, you also have to lead yourself first if you're going to lead others. So let's think about that. And then this is just I'll just put all the pieces up here to talk about it for a minute. But this Venn diagram, I always think of these as muscles, and we know that we need to both lead and manage. And my distinctions on the two are, when you're managing, you are managing for the most effective, efficient means to get the job done. The most effective, efficient means to get the job done. When you are leading, it's all about looking toward that vision, toward the end game, toward those goals, and then taking the steps necessary to get there. Typically, but not 100% of the time, when you are managing, it is more tactical. It's not all tactical, but it is more tactical. Again, it's about getting the job done in the most efficient, effective way possible. When you're leading, it is much more strategic. It's about that vision. It's about looking long-term, connecting those dots toward the end goal. And then, of course, the middle of this Venn diagram is your people. So you need to both manage them and you need to lead them. So I just wanted to share that to make sure that we have some shared language for this part of the discussion. So during COVID, what did we learn about ourselves as leaders? We knew that it was important to model and be very good at leading in this sense of ambiguity, not knowing. I'm sure I wasn't the only one who at the beginning in March, when we were first sent home, thought, a couple months, we'll be done with this. I'll start planning for in-person events in the summer, or at the very least, the fall, we'll be back in person. No, we had to learn how to deal with that uncertainty, not knowing what was coming next. That to me is COVID style. The other thing that is not comfortable for most leaders is allowing yourselves to be vulnerable and to show your vulnerability and to model that. Because guess what? We all were vulnerable during this crisis. And if you didn't learn how to do this and show that you were human to your people, you missed an opportunity. Because it's, as I've seen throughout my career, that when we were all trying to show up as the best version of ourselves and do the best job that we can possibly do, that oftentimes our people see us as perfect. They don't think we make mistakes. They are afraid often to share their mistakes or to show their vulnerability. We were all vulnerable during this time. And so if we just shared that and modeled what that looks like, owning it and asking for help for how to deal with that and how to navigate, it was a gift that I hope you all took advantage of. So where are we now during this turbulent re-entry? And this is what I think is critical at this stage, is to think back and remember where you were, how you managed through this, and how you were leading your people. But these three things: to rest up, we're heading into Memorial Weekend, whatever that looks like for you, recharge, and then reset. So whatever this looks like for you, to rest up, is it go to the beach? Is it go to the mountains? Is it just to sit by your window? Or is it to open some new books and really think about, where do I want to go? And if you're someone that's extremely active, maybe it's now time for you to take a trip or to really challenge yourself to do something a little new, or reconnect with someone, perhaps your spouse or a significant other. Or maybe it's family. I know we've all spent a lot of family time, whatever your family looks like, but maybe it's time for that really to recharge, because we are going into this new normal or next normal. And we know that, as I stated in the beginning, it's really important as a leader and a manager, and this also is true at home, to be able to help the people around us navigate this transition and this reentry that I do believe is turbulent. I know that I'm feeling it, and back to those goalposts being moved, but I'm like, why now do I feel so much anxiety? It's not fear. It's just that I was getting comfortable in that world, and I felt like I had it pretty much under control. Now it's a lot more energy to really now restart everything. So make sure that your energy is just, your reserves are there. So where are we post-pandemic? And what is the most important for us right now? And this is what I want to really talk about these next couple slides together and see where you are. So leading with a clear vision. There's nothing new about this concept as a leader, being able to really have a clear vision for where you want to go. And when I say where you want to go, there's the long-term vision for your organization. And then there's the shorter-term vision of where are we going this year, next year, or whatever that looks like. And connecting those dots for people and being able to really clearly articulate that vision. You know where you're going. You've probably had plenty of time to think about this. Remember, all of your folks are still they may be in varying places of that transition. So please continue to articulate. And we're going to talk about what kind of listening you need to be doing as we go through this reentry. So really listen to everything that they're trying to tell you. But if you haven't already done this, really clarify and put it down in writing where you're going and what that vision looks like and how you want to articulate it. It's never been more important to manage with more precision right now, to really understand what each of your people need and how you're going to give it to them. So precision in managing. They're all going to need different things. This goes to work style, whether you're going to continue with a hybrid or in-person work environment. What does that look like? What are your expectations? Clearly articulating those and making sure that there is a definitive understanding of what you're trying to articulate. Engage, collaborate, and create your own ecosystem. If we did not learn anything else from this pandemic, we all learned that we needed to be more in touch with every aspect of our organizations, but we also learned that we can't do it ourselves. Collaborating takes a lot more energy, particularly in a virtual environment, but it can be the game changer for our organizations. So by engaging our people and our external partners, collaborating internally and externally, and really thinking about your overall ecosystem can be your secret to success in the future. So what is this?
Can I interrupt a quick second?
Sure.
Is it important to have that conversations with individuals, let's just say individually, but then also as a group? Because is it more like also getting feedback? Because you're trying to lead and manage, right? But you want their feedback so you get their buy-in. Okay.
I would say it's both and.
Okay.
In fact, I would say so much right now is a both and. Mm-hmm. So if you ever find yourself in a position where you're using the terms it's either or you even just feel that's coming out in what you're saying, stop yourself. Because rarely are things black and white, either or. And clearly right now, there's so much more in the gray area. So you want to make sure and solicit that input. And we'll talk about that in these points.
Thanks.
Sure. So let's talk about what collaboration is for just a second, because I really mean it in the more holistic sense of the word itself. And it can be both tactical and strategic. So when you're collaborating internally and you're having maybe a brainstorming session or just a listening session, it can be very tactical. How do we want to go about this? What does a hybrid environment look like? what's the better way to approach our clients? And what you were talking about earlier, Angela, for the chamber, which programs should stay virtual? What did we learn that is really good for us that we want to hold on to? Those are they could be strategic, but there also can be very tactical kinds of discussions. It can be both individual and collective. So definitely listen to the group and listen to individuals and talk with them. My organization is very small from a staff standpoint. When we are fully staffed, we're 4 or 5, depending, and we were down to 3 during COVID. So boy, I have to be talking to, we have team meetings all the time, but then I also have about 75 key volunteers that I rely on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. So it's really important for me to be dealing with people individually and collectively in order to have made it through here and now planning for whatever our future will look like. And right now, to be quite frank, I'm doing strategic planning with our board, but when I'm dealing with my volunteers and my staff, it is really about next year. What does this look like? And how do we transition and keep the good stuff that we learned, but yet see what's missing? That in-person thing was really missing from the relationship building. Make sure that back to articulating your vision, which can be your goals and objectives as well. So articulate that so that the collaboration is focused. It's okay to give people opportunities to just talk if they need to, but make sure that if you are convening conversations for people just to talk, that you're the one that's pulling the information out of that. So it's focused on your goals and objectives so that it is time well spent. And listen. We'll talk a little bit about level 3 listening as we get here. And then as a leader, whether you say this out loud or you just say it to yourself, this goes back to the polarity management, not the either or. All of that is, okay, if it's a both and, how do we get where we need to go? And so just have that in your brain. How do we get to yes? I mean, there's a whole book written on theory around this, but I find it's just helpful to have that Twitter feed going through your head. How are we going to get to yes? Because you've been thinking about where you want to go. Now with collaboration is getting your people and your partners all on the same page. So how do you create your own ecosystem? What we're going to talk about here really is around more strategically looking at your organization for the future and around a little bit more of the emotional intelligence piece of it around your people. So I'll just put them all up here so that you can all comment, and I'll go through them for a second, but I'd like your input on this. But I think our own value equations for our organizations have shifted a bit. And maybe that's a good thing, and maybe it's not. But I think it's a good time during this transition to at least step back and think about it and reimagine what our value equation is. What does it look like? Maybe we need to recreate it. Redefine our purpose. Redefine your purpose. Redefine your purpose. I'll give you an example of that. And ours actually came through our last strategic plan at Leadership Fairfax, but it became more critical and crystal clear to us during the pandemic. Our mission and our vision was always to develop, train, and connect community leaders. And to do that by bringing people together from all the sectors so that they could learn from people with different perspectives. Now that we have over 2,000 alums that are out there doing great things in their organizations and in the community, running nonprofits and all of that, we redefined our purpose, which was really to engage our alums and our partners throughout the community in creating a sustainable and equitable community for all. So it was an extension of our original mission. But during COVID, it was actually a gift that we could really think about refining that, not redefining it for us, but refining where we were going with that purpose. But then internally, this is a great opportunity to get really intentional about the culture you want to create. because you did it on the fly, whether you called it a cultural shift for you or not, you did it on a fly in order to survive COVID. So be really intentional now and talk about, okay, what do we want our culture look like internally? And then how will that reflect externally to your trading partners or your customers? The best way to do that is really to encourage creative thinking and curiosity. You want to help your people have a less turbulent transition, help them to really think creatively and be really curious about what this next stage could look like. That can help them get those juices going and get rid of some of the fear that they might have about whatever this next normal will look like. And I'd like to pause there for a minute and get any feedback around those first 4 thoughts, I guess is the best way to put those.
Yeah, I totally agree, Karen. I think that it's hard for me to imagine many organizations that haven't gone through this that aren't taking this as an opportunity to re-examine your purpose and be more intentional about how you're going to go about doing things. It's just, you can't be immune to at least wanting to pose the question and think about it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Charles.
I'm not going to speak for Madeline, but I'm going to throw something out there. Only because I know Connie, and I interviewed them recently for Business Focus. And it seems as you guys were able to branch into kind of a new opportunity with the partnerships, right, and organizations. So again, it's that kind of, I don't say redefining, but getting creative, maybe, and running the business. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, absolutely. That's 100% what happened. At first, when everything closed down, I would say we went through all these, both, from going from giving in-person trainings, we turned completely virtual, and we created our ecosystem by keeping our community both through sort of live sessions through social media to support our clients with different types of health tips, those kind of things to stay connected. And then as well, we created this opportunity with 2 different clinics, physical therapy clinic and a chiropractic clinic, and a whole new program was developed. So it definitely turned into an opportunity in a time of a crisis, which was incredible.
Fantastic. So for you, it's just about getting creative now, again, to say, all right, we learned from this, it worked. How do we take this strength going forward and use it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we go forward. Great. David?
Yeah, I think, looking at your 4th bullet there and then popping back to the top. So encouraging the curiosity to, as we look outside of, let's say, external to our organization, to clients, to prospects, to suppliers, to partners, et cetera, that's going to help, see how value creation and purpose are applicable now versus a year ago, because it's going to be different, right? And if you sort of say, okay, people are hesitant to get out there and hesitant, some people are hesitant to get out, and then we're encouraging, get the answers from the market, not inside the building. It's going to take a lot of encouragement, right? But that's where the answers are. That's what's going to help us see how the world is now versus, what we hope it's going to be back to normal, which isn't going to happen, as you said. So thinking of how you create value now and thinking about what our purpose is now based on all the external factors affecting our business really takes that encouragement to get out there and ask the questions, and don't be afraid to look dumb, and don't be afraid to be embarrassed, and all those things.
And I'll bet that in conversations that you or your folks have had with some of your customers and trading partners during this time, just anecdotally, you learned some things about what your strengths are and why they want to work with you. So capture those too, because those become part of your value equation and the story you want to tell.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's so true. But here's the other thing, that why this is so important now, to just rest up quickly and do, I say quickly, rest up, recharge, but then do this, get a plan in place. Because I'm telling you, when people are ready to come back, it's going to come back with a fury. You know, just even the whole office space thing, you know, a lot of people have been saying, oh, you know, people aren't going to come back to office. We're going to have to redefine office space. We're going to have to do, you know, people just aren't going to be coming back. Go have a conversation with one of the people from the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority. What they would tell you is their activity is more robust than ever right now. Companies are looking to expand and they're coming to Northern Virginia. So there will be plenty of people that are ready to just charge ahead. So you don't want to just do that and make it like a grab session. You want to do this and be prepared, but know that it's coming. So be prepared for that so that your business can grow the way you want it to grow. And that's really where these two things come in. And it's important to do those first four first, keeping in mind it's a transition period, but be as agile as you can be. And I mean agile in both senses of the word. The more traditional Webster definition of being, you know, able to move swiftly and agilely is the best thing I can think of there, but also from the standpoint of the new working environment that we have in the corporate world of creating an agile decision-making tree, if you can. So making sure that at the important conversations that you've got people that can actually either make decisions or at least are giving you the kind of information that you need in order to be making decisions going forward. And that ties into this next one that I borrowed from somewhere in my notes. I have who actually said this or coined this phrase about being anti-fragile, but it was in a Forbes article I was reading. And I loved that. It's just, you know, words are good to just stimulate your thinking. But if you are truly agile, and then you say, we're not going to be afraid, we're going to take some risks. Let's just make sure that we understand what the risks are that we're taking. And that's kind of that anti-fragile kind of thing. But all of these things together can help you to create that ecosystem that will support you going forward. Oh, turbocharge the decision-making. I forgot to put that up there. That kind of goes back to the being agile and anti-fragile. Is it's going to come back with a vengeance. It's going to come back fast. So make sure that you are as clear as you can possibly be so that your decision-making does not languish, so that it's quick and that you feel comfortable with the decisions that you're making. So just know the risks in all the decisions that you're making, but you don't want to be slow or you will miss opportunities. At least I believe that. So we're going to talk a minute about listening. And I just use the 3 levels of listening because this is important with your customers. It's really important with your people to make sure that you are listening on all 3 levels. If this is too basic for you, my apologies, but I'm just going to go through these quickly so that we're, again, have a baseline for this. But there are an awful lot of people out there still, and this probably is within your ranks as well. You certainly see this at networking events all the time. People that are level 1 listeners. They only listen long enough so that they can tell you all about what they are doing. So they only listen for those keywords, and then they turn around to tell you something. And on a personal, you know, out in the community basis, these are usually people who need somebody to talk to. So they can't wait to tell you all about how great they are or what happened to them during COVID or whatever. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just recognizing when that happens. Then there's level 2 listening, which we get pretty good at in the business world, which is listening for facts and important keywords and really listening with our ears and taking it all in order to frame up whatever it is that we need to do. If you're in sales, you get really good at objective listening so that you know exactly what your customers want and need so that you can frame your response to it. I feel, and level 2 listening is fine in most work environments, but I really believe that this level 3 listening is critical during this re-entry period. Whoops, must be timed accidentally. So this is intuitive listening. It was very difficult for most of us to do this completely in a virtual environment. I know that on Zoom calls, when we at Leadership Fairfax train, so we have about 50 people on a Zoom call at one time, I try to go through the gallery and really watch how people are responding. And I try not to judge, because sometimes people just have other things going on that they need to, turn their video off, or they're checking their emails on the side, or they're checking the time on their phone, as I've done a couple times here, to be respectful of your time, but also to try to pay attention to what's going on with them. So level 3, or intuitive listening, is about listening with your entire body and listening to everything that's going on with someone else and not being afraid to ask them what's going on. So remember how we talked about in the importance of having conversations both collectively and individually? This is important to think about if you are doing a team meeting, for instance, and you're trying to read your people. Don't be afraid to go back to someone who you noticed something about their body language or their facial expressions or whatever it might be that was going on for you. And then it really, don't be afraid to ask them. So here's ways to show that you're listening, because it's one thing to really be listening at this level, but you want to make sure that your people know that you're listening. So really pay attention physically to them, lean into the conversation, nod when you're listening, not fake nodding like as you're looking at your phone. Really look at them, listen, repeat back, rephrase, comment. Really make sure that you are sharing, that you are hearing them and trying to understand what they're saying or where they're coming from. Notice it by commenting. So this is the second part of listening, because you can listen all you want, but if you don't ask your folks some good questions to find out what's really under that. Now, I'm a leadership coach, so I always like the opportunity to share how to ask powerful questions. And I don't mean to insult someone if this is how you normally operate with your folks. I just mean it as a good reminder to really change your vocabulary so that the questions you ask, that you are genuinely curious as to what's going on with your people, and start your questions as often as you can with what, how, perhaps when, and try to eliminate the word why from asking questions. Back to the point that you don't know where all of your people are in transition or where their heads are. If you ask people starting with why, sometimes it's not a problem, but if you can eliminate it, you're better. Because if you say, why would we do that? Some people can get defensive and then they stop answering. If instead you frame the question as, what would that look like? Help me understand. Tell me more. Those become really respectful questions that show that A, you're listening, B, you really do want to hear what people are thinking and you respect their thoughts. If you practice this on a routine basis, you become really good at it. And then it's also a very good leadership development tool because you learn more about what your people are thinking, truly thinking, and how they will approach your work. So you learn who you can just trust more to let them go and less backtracking on things like that. If you're like me, there was a time in my career where I was running a nonprofit and I realized that I had become the answer person. And it became easier to give the answers than to ask the questions because there was so little time. What happened was my people realized it was easier to just come ask me than to figure it out themselves or even think on their own. So when I was in my coaching training, I started practicing this. And one day I said, all right, today I'm not giving one answer. All I'm going to do is turn it around and ask questions. It was one of the hardest days in my work ever. And it was one of the most liberating days I ever had. I learned so much more about everybody in my organization. And I started to adopt this. And I catch myself when I fall back into it. When time is of the essence, it's really easy to fall back into being the answer person. Does this ring a bell for folks? How's this feel?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Karen. I think, all of us, especially with that poll, just seeing where people are, you can lean on that tactical managerial side of your job sometimes and just want to cross things off your to-do list as efficiently as possible.
That's right. There's one other thing that I didn't put on here, but given this transitional period from COVID pandemic to post-pandemic, there are fine lines when it comes to mental health in our work environment. And you want to be cautious not to become a therapist for people, but you also want to recognize when someone's having a difficult time. So the best way to do that and to figure out the difference as to whether or not it's something that you can handle internally or to make a recommendation for them to talk to someone is to really offer observations. Observations are not judgmental. They are factual, but you always want to ask permission to offer an observation. So let's just say that you are recognizing some anxiety, anxiety is a judgment, I shouldn't say that. Some things like you have somebody on your team who's really holding back physically, arms are always crossed, they're not looking at you, they seem fidgeting. Those are all factual things that you can observe. So if you can try not to go to a conclusion on that, but to have a one-on-one conversation and say, hey, can I offer an observation? I've been watching you and trying to listen, and then what is it that you observed? You haven't been talking or offering whatever that you normally do in team meetings. You seem to be holding back, and I'm not getting very much feedback or eye contact. What's going on? Again, not a why. What's going on? Can you share with me? So closed-ended questions, yes and no, often just get a yes or a no. But if you say something like, what's going on? How are you feeling? What are you thinking about this transition? So practicing these, I will tell you that for me personally, it was really helpful to practice these at home as well. And it can also really help your personal relationships as well, because you learn more about each other instead of when we know people really well, whether it's in a work environment or a personal environment, we think we know all the answers and we think we know exactly where they're coming from. And we don't. We're people. And we change. So really listening at level 3 and asking those questions with what and how are really good practices to have. I'm looking at the clock, Angela. We've got 5 minutes left.
Yes, ma'am.
So I always think this is Brene Brown, and she's talking about empathy. And we knew that it was really important to be empathetic. She says empathic. I always say empathetic. But I think it's important to remember this going forward too, because it's not going to be easy. And again, we'll be at different places. So if you're good with me, I'd like you to listen to Brene Brown. It's only about 2.5 minutes, I think.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Oops. Always do that. Click on the wrong thing. So with empathy, and again, it was really critical during COVID to try to strengthen that muscle of empathy. And if nothing else, I especially like when the bear says, I don't even know what to say, but I'm here for you. That was really important. So think of yourself as that bear when that opportunity arises. Now, there is one caution here that I think is important. All the other stuff that we talked about here about the fact that it's going to start moving pretty quickly, and you want to be prepared for that. Also know where you are, where your emotional reserve is. Because if you need to be down in that cave and be the bear for everyone, it can zap your emotional energy that is needed to run your organizations or manage your team. So just be aware of that so that you're not giving away all of that energy that you have stored up. Because I know you're all going to leave here and you're going to spend the Memorial weekend really re-energizing and coming back. So what I hope you take away from today is to be strategic and really think about that vision in the culture and lead that way. Lead with that vision every day. Be decisive and inclusive. Take advantage of the people that you have around you. Include them in it, but then be decisive, regardless of your style. And listen, listen, and listen. And please don't waste this crisis. Please learn from it and use it going forward. I have no idea why it's doing that. And I just want to thank you for your time. This is just a shameless promotion for Leadership Fairfax, because we're in recruitment time right now for next year's class that starts in September. But I want to thank you for inviting me here. It's always fun to be back in front of folks at the Reston Chamber.
So does anyone have any questions? We'll open it up for discussion. I love this part. I do want to say, though, the word empathy, like we use that a lot in ours, and we focus on marketing, right, for small businesses. And one of the key skills, if you want to really connect with your customer or your ideal client, is having empathy and really knowing, if you know your client and you can talk to them in a way that they say, wow, she gets me or he gets me, then it's an amazing type of connection. And those people naturally want to do business with you, but there's more likelihood for that. So it's a very powerful word.
And it is.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I'll just say, commenting, it was really exciting to hear some of these action plans as we're moving forward. And I think in a lot of ways, if I am going to silver line, I'll use the verb there, coming out of this crisis, I think leading up to it, there are a lot of organizations that were probably contemplating wanting to reevaluate their direction or their purpose or their culture, but there's always a sense of inertia, especially if you happen to be a successful organization, of maintaining the status quo. And this post-pandemic world that we're entering kind of gives you cover to be able to do a lot of the strategic things that you talked about, things that you may have wanted to do, and now you've got a bona fide reason to move forward with those. So there's reason to be excited about where you're coming out of from all of this.
Totally agree.
And Madeline, just real quick, you said you manage that location for Personal 20
yes.
in Herndon?
Yes, correct. I was just recently promoted to manage as we expanded to a second location. And Connie and Carmen are managing that one at the moment.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's again, in this time of a very tough year, to be able to expand and grow. And I still call it pivot. It's pretty great to hear.
Yeah, it tied into very well, I think, with the whole presentation with, be agile, be anti-fragile, and really, see the opportunity and repurpose and all that to really turn it into a new, opportunity and a new, stronger experience for sure. And, it turned out very good.
Well, it's hard to balance, Karen, you talk a lot about leadership and people, right? But then you also have you've got operations, right? And you've got clients coming in. So it's just definitely a different, like the customer's always right? Or you got to just balance kind of what you're spending your day doing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Karen. We always love having you. So thank you for your fabulous presentations, which I'm so glad is recorded. If you folks don't know about Leadership Fairfax, it might be something of interest. Just definitely check out their website. I'm sure they'll be doing informational sessions throughout the next few months to fill up that class, which does.
Reston Opportunity Neighborhood and the Neighborhood Ambassador Program is just one example of a number of supportive programs and resources that Cornerstones provides to families and individuals on their journey to a better life. Participation provides ways for residents in low-income neighborhoods to help lift up their voice and identify and prioritize their needs. These are the very same neighborhoods in which Cornerstones works to implement interventions and provide supportive care. Neighborhood ambassadors are active change leaders, problem solvers, and advocates for the change they and their neighbors want to see. Neighborhood ambassadors, resident leaders from the 5 opportunity neighborhoods, are integral partners participating at every level of leadership in our opportunity neighborhood structure in order to identify and address social and racial inequities in our community. Saizana is a dedicated volunteer and passionate advocate for her community. She saw a need among the women in her neighborhood who might benefit from greater independence and inclusion into the larger community. So she began leading a free weekly English class at the Southgate Community Center.
Having the language is a good start to being anywhere, I think. It's a confidence building. Just to be able to say hi and bye in the language of amongst, the community that you live in, I think is crucial. When the kids come home from school, maybe they'll bring pieces of homework they may not understand, but at least they know I too am learning like you. And it's a continuous journey for everybody in different scale. A lot of the women in the class have gone on to continue the education. Many are taking the GED night classes, you know, and continuing English classes at the community college. I'm very proud of that. Many of them, some of them have come in with learner's permit when they started the class, but they've now taken that extra step of getting their driver's license, which is a huge deal. It's just a stepping stone to say, you know, what else and what's next. It'd be wonderful, I think, if the community, individuals, families, the community together have the trust in themselves, that they have all they need to succeed. And that when they have that confidence to say, I know what I want, me, the neighborhood ambassador, you know, the PCAs, the program coordinator, advocates, really the resource providers, we can say, we're here, we want for you what you want for yourself, you know, and tell us how we can walk with you. And how the community can help each other, really just the encouragement.
With your help, Cornerstones can bring people together to harness the strategies, program expertise, and resources for those in need to provide greater community well-being for everyone.
Fairfax County is one of the wealthiest counties in the country, but there are currently over 1,200 people that are homeless. 59% of the adults in these families are working but unable to locate affordable housing.
Shelter House is an organization that works with the homeless and victims of domestic violence to provide services that promote self-sufficiency. Housing is the key to getting these Fairfax citizens back on their feet.
We're looking to connect prospective tenants with landlords that are willing to give them a chance. If you or someone you know is a landlord and has a property to rent, please contact Shelter House.